Okay.
That's what suggestion.
Yeah, I think you're right.
about
Before we get started here, somebody lose a pair of glasses. They were found in the parking lot. They're a little too colorful for my style.
They might be mine. I have
Can't see without my glasses.
Well, welcome once again to East Chapel Hill Rotary and Bob Boyd, being Sergeant at Arms today. This is the May 2nd, 2025 meeting of East Chapel Hill Rotary. This is the 58th year of East Chapel Hill Rotary, or as our President Tim Smith would say, 5 down and 37 down and 5 to go. So as we start, let's remember those words that we always remember: truth, fair, goodwill, and beneficial to all. Do we have guests here today?
Yes, Jim Miller.
Welcome.
We have a guest return for the second time, right? Rebecca?
Third time.
Third time.
Great to be here.
Bob,
Yes.
we have Jonathan Scott, who is a guest at Ponche's, who's got playing golf right now. This is for charity. I'm not sure what charity. Jonathan's an ER doc, his third visit, and he paid for the first two, so welcome to the best.
After 3 times, you have to start paying, right? Visiting Rotarians, any of those? Oh my goodness, yes. We have a visiting Rotarian. I think it's Mike Fields.
Probably am a visitor. I won't get much anymore. But it'll be a little more this summer. We're back.
The snow hadn't melted in the mountains yet, so you had to leave.
It's beautiful up there. The golf course is very impressive.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Okay, I got the fine basket here. I'm not going to forget it this time. Put a dollar in there if you're glad it's finally spring, and put $2 in there if you're not happy with spring. And speaking of fines, y'all know we used to do these special fines when people had their names in the paper or on the radio, because nobody reads the paper anymore, nobody listens to the radio. But we used to do these special fines for that, and I hadn't heard us do that in a long time. In fact, we still got a lot of problems with people in this club that get some publicity. So remember, to avoid that fine, you have to mention East Chapel Hill Rotary. We had a member years ago named Chuck Stone, and Chuck was always being quoted and always. He paid so much in fines that kept a lot of us from having to increase our dues. He was always having to come up with those extra fine. As y'all can tell, I'm dressed a little differently today. My theme is going to be a little bit about baseball. Steve Frommey started this a couple of weeks ago, and he did a baseball thing. And so I thought I'd continue that. One interesting fact has happened this season. Carolina, of course, has a great baseball team this year. Now ranked 3rd in the country. Earlier in April, there was a no-hitter. Carolina had a combined, it's called a combined no-hitter. 3 pitchers pitched. And Folger Boaz, Cameron Seagraves, and Nolan Johnson combined to pitch a no-hitter And that was the first time that had been done in Carolina since 1999. And that time that it was done in 1999 had an East Chapel Hill Rotary connection. The two pitchers that pitched it, one was Chris Elmore, who is still a member of East Chapel Hill Rotary, and one of the great recruits of Robert Oakes and I for the East Chapel Hill Rotary softball team. We barely stayed above the Chapel Hill Rec League rules in that recruitment. But anyway, Chris was one of the pitchers in that there. The other one was Ryan Erie, who was the son of Mike Erie, also a former, of course, he's no longer with us, but Mike was an East Chapel Hill Rotary. So anyway, that had been East Chapel Hill Rotary connection. If we were still doing fines, and Chris Elmore was here, we would fine him for that. But next time he shows up, they will fine him for not mentioning East Chapel Hill Rotary in that article. So, as I said, you're looking at one of the 3 items of red that I have in my wardrobe. I don't wear much red for obvious reasons. But I have a St. Louis Cardinals baseball flag. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about baseball, and I'm going to use some things from a great comedian named George Carlin, who talked about why he liked baseball so much, and then some other folks too. No other sport has given as many great movies as baseball. Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, A League of Their Own, Bad News Bears, For the Love of the Game, and there were many more. And then there was also the classic comedy routine, Who's on First? Abbott and Costello. Hopefully somebody old enough to remember that. But in baseball, you don't, most sports you score touchdowns, points, goals. Baseball, you score runs. Other sports, the offense has the ball and initiates the play. Not in baseball. The defense initiates the play. You don't have the ball when you score in baseball. You don't want the ball. You want to avoid the ball. In baseball, you're tagged out. You're not tackled. You're checked. Baseball is played on a diamond with an infield and an outfield in what's called a ballpark. Players wear caps. Coaches and managers wear uniforms, not coats and ties and sweat clothes and hoodies. Positions are called simple things like pitcher, catcher, and any other positions by where you're located on the field. A mistake by a fielder is called an error. And that line's made an error. It's a game where the greatest players fail 70% of the time. And if you can do just a little bit better than that, you can be chosen into the Baseball Hall of Fame in the quaint village of Cooperstown, New York. You help your teammate with a sacrifice. Other nice terms, like a bunt. A substitute pitcher is called a reliever. All hit beyond the boundaries is called a foul. There are fly balls, ground balls, a walk, home run, innings, first base, second base, third base. If it rains, you don't play. There's no halftime. There is the 7th inning stretch where we all stand up and sing, talk about eating peanuts and Cracker Jacks, not caring about time, pulling for the home team. But if we don't win, it's a shame. It's still a kid's game. It can be played in backyards, schoolyards, cul-de-sacs. It can be played by as few as 2 or as many as you got. I remember playing until dark, or until too many kids got called to go home to eat supper. And speaking of time, to a true baseball fan, it's wonderful that there's no time limit in baseball. You play innings. And if the game is tied at the end of about 9 innings, you don't go to overtime. You play extra innings. And for those of us that are fans, that's free baseball. The object is to score runs by getting home and being safe. In the movie Field of Dreams, you remember Burt Lancaster, who played Archie Griffin. Archie Griffin was a Carolina guy. He was a brother of Archie Graham, not Archie Griffin. Archie Graham. He was a Carolina guy. He played baseball at Carolina. He was a brother of Frank Porterman. And you remember the line Burt Lancaster said, "You walk out on that field, the grass so green, the sky so blue, it hurts your eyes." And then as the great James Earl Jones said, he played Terrence Mann in that movie, and he told Kevin Costner, Ray Costello, this game, it's a part of our past. It reminds us of all that was once good and could be good again. It's baseball, Ray. It's baseball. Y'all have a good day.
Well, thank you so much. That was excellent. Our heels are off this weekend, so maybe I'll get something done around the house. Good to see everybody. It was great to see so many of you at Jennifer Player's fundraiser for Habitat last Saturday night. That was fun. I have been meaning to recognize that Linda Sanders, I don't know if she's here today or not, but donated that beautiful ram that you see as you check in, coming in. And it is from Amina's Gift, which was started by another member, Terrence Bradyboy. So check it out. It's a beautiful thing. I'm meaning to highlight that. Please silence your phones if you have not already. I do want to make mention, many of you know Fezzi here. He and his wife Deborah take such good care of us. His mother passed away recently, so please keep him in your thoughts. Let's see here. Steak night. It is coming up Wednesday, May 14th. Circulating a sign-up sheet, but there's also an electronic link that you can use. So please come out. It's out at the Rooster Hut. It's always a fun time. Let's see here. Bob Ostrom, you've got a message for us.
So we had our first volunteer session at the table. It went really well. We're looking for 6 people from May 12th. For the first one, I want to thank Liz, and Bill, and Tom, and
Jim?
No, Bill behind Bill. No, he hasn't done it yet. Bill did that.
Don't get credit yet.
And Terry Ostrom was substituting for Vegas. It really is an incredibly efficient way to spend an hour and a half of your time helping the community. You feed 1,100 kids a week. They're so efficient. You will be there at 1, and I guarantee you'll be out by 2:30. And we're doing special diets. And May 12th, 1 to 2:30. And I'm still looking for 2 more volunteers for those days. So please sign up. Tim sent out. It was in the scuttlebutt. Tim sent out the link. Or let Tim or let me know. But it really is a great way to spend an hour and a half of your time given back.
Thanks, Bob. A reminder that we are using proper dishware today, so at the end of the meeting, if you will, just bring it up to the window so that it makes it easier on the folks helping us today. We are very fortunate to have Stacy Wood with us today, and before I bring Jim up to introduce her, Stacy indicated that, I'm sure she'll answer questions at the end, but really also prefers more of a conversational presentation. So if you have a question during her presentation, please by all means ask it. We will ask you to stand and project, and it's just a consideration for everyone else in the room so that we don't have to repeat your question. Yes, sir.
Important question.
Yes.
What kind of steaks and how thick are they?
It's a very important question. That's above my pay grade, though. And Mike Clayton is in charge of them. They do come from Fresh Market, I know that.
I mean, these aren't miserable little tourist steaks. They're big, thick.
They're not rubbery, no. Mike does a great job, I tell you that. Thank you for bringing that up. You won't have a better steak. But, where was it? So I think that concludes my announcements. Jim, if you will be so kind to introduce our speaker.
We do have, I don't want to take up too much of the retirement company business, but we've got a little problem. Jordan Hudson has indicated that we will not be able to continue meeting like this unless she is put in charge of all future speakers for the program and how long they speak and what questions they will be able to take. And so we'll put that before you folks to have a vote on that, because we want to make sure no one person wants to be responsible for anything that Ms. Hudson is doing. All right. Fellow Rotarians, today it's a wonderful thing to welcome home a speaker who actually lives here in Chapel Hill. And we're doing this today in the spirit of welcoming home a sort of a prodigal, because even though she lives in Chapel Hill and identifies as a Tar Heel, she drives to the faraway land of Raleigh to practice her research in a pack of wolves. And so somehow, even there though, she has discovered that research and reason can somehow or another meld into marketing and medicine, and she's going to talk about that here today. One of the, as you can see in your biography, recently named one of the most impactful marketing scholars in the world. And here she is, Stacy Wood.
Thanks, everyone. As I get my lavalier mic on here, I should probably note that I am nowhere near as impactful a marketing scholar as the very eminent Paige Moreau, daughter of Dave Moreau. So, and one of my close friends. All right, where's the power button? There we go. If I step away, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Now the very important job of the clicker. Make sure that works. All right. Yes. I am all suited up and ready. All right. So I really appreciate this chance to come back and talk to you. I gave a speech before this group I think it was probably 12 years ago, about consumer behavior, my field of study. And I've been doing a lot of things since then. Obviously, Chapel Hill is very dear to me. Many people in this room know my husband, Carl King, who was the pastor at University United Methodist on Franklin Street for 10 years. While we were there, we had 2 daughters who are now a lot bigger than the babies that our church members remember. But Jim asked me to make myself a little bit more human. and make sure you realize I come from family. I'm not just this wolf in the wolf pack, and I do have to also admit that I teach devils. At the same time, though, this picture comes from New Zealand, from the townhome where we lived for 2 months. We just got back from Australia and New Zealand, living there. I was getting a lot of talks to healthcare organizations about the things I'm going to be speaking to you today, and we got the chance to really spend an extended time there. And one of the neat things was, as we were traveling around, we went to Rotary, which is in the North Island, and we were walking through a rose garden, a botanical garden, and there was this lovely sort of garden building, and it looked like people were having a luncheon inside, and as we walked past, we saw that it was the Rotary Club. So the Rotary Club in Rotorua, New Zealand looks like they are just packed to the gills and doing well. So this is my family, and yet what I really want to tell you about are my parents. So this is Wade and Marcia Wood, a photograph from right around the time when they had me. They lived in San Francisco, but they've lived all over the world. My dad's an engineer, a civil engineer. He builds power plants. And my mom while she's done many things over the course of her life, she's been a real estate agent and a pharmaceutical salesperson. For a long time, she was a nurse. She did emergency medicine for a long time, and then neighborhood public health medicine. And my dad, I can tell you, really hoped that I would grow up to be an engineer. And my mom really hoped that I would grow up to be a doctor. And so I'm the black sheep of my family because my younger sister, who's also good at all the sports, became an engineer, kept up the tradition, and I got a PhD in marketing, which is like the antithesis of engineering. In fact, when I told my dad that I wanted to get a PhD in marketing, he looked at me and he said, "Can you even do such a thing?" And I said, "Yes, of course you can." And he goes, "What would you do with that?" I said, "I'd be a professor." We've come around. But I think the reason why we have come around is because so much of my work actually brings together my early interests in engineering. My dad showed me how to build everything, do everything. There was never a moment when he didn't say, "Stacy, come here and see this," when he was, fixing the lawnmower or programming something on the computer. And my mom's always been interested in medicine. And so from an early in my career, I started studying innovation. I love innovation. I study the psychology, the human side of innovation. To me, it's fascinating, largely because I don't change very much. Someone asked me, "Are you an introvert or an extrovert?" And I said, "Oh, I'm an introvert." And I don't change. I am a non-innovative introvert. And yet somehow, through my career, I have studied innovation, and I think actually become an innovator because so many of the characteristics necessary to successful innovation are counterintuitive. So many of them are actually things that are better done by people who are listeners rather than talkers. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. At NC State, which has been exceedingly good to me, I founded and for a long time was the executive director of the Consumer Innovation Collaborative, where we did work for big companies all over the world. And I also did consulting on my own. And I started to notice that a lot of the companies I worked with were something in healthcare. And I was interested in healthcare. I'm interested in how people make decisions. And so some of the companies I've worked with over the years have been Bayer and Quintiles and AmerisourceBergen and Express Scripts and even Amazon Health Services. And all of that was kind of in my business world. And then in 2015, I met Kevin Schulman. He, at the time, was a doctor at Duke School of Medicine and definitely known in his field as being something of a futurist. He created a program called Masters in the Management of Clinical Informatics and Innovation. And so he asked me to teach in that class. I mean, I think he was just really trying to find a marketing professor who would take over for a marketing professor that way. And so I agreed to teach this class, honestly, for nothing more than the money. It was a nice side gig, good side hustle. Little did I know what an impact that would have on my career. So I took this job teaching in the Duke School of Medicine, And my students were senior doctors, senior hospital administrators, senior nurses, people in information technology, all of these really interesting, important people in medicine, and they were all trying to learn how the world of business, medicine, and technology were going to come together and create the future of healthcare. That was what this master's was all about. And I loved it. I think I loved it primarily because no student ever came to my class and said, oh, awesome, we're going to learn about marketing. In fact, it was exactly the opposite. They'd come in and they'd be like, what are we talking about marketing for? Marketing is evil, which I'm used to because I have an engineer for a father. He's like, you're just teaching children how to drink sugary soft drinks. In fact, that was exactly what my husband, the Reverend Carl King, said to me on our first date, is how can you sleep at night? Yeah, he's a charmer. How can you sleep at night when what you do is teach people to buy things they don't need? And I said, you can take everything I'm teaching and use it to get people to donate more blood. You can get it to get people to quit smoking. You can do it for any number of good things. You can even do it to get people to come to church more. And then he was interested. But really, the thing is that I'm used to that. I'm used to people thinking that marketing is something not quite nice. And so Kevin, though, was maybe the first person in medicine I've met who thought there was really interesting things going on here, because basically I study decision making. And so early on, we were at lunch together and we were talking about things, and this was his question. Why do cancer patients go to much more extreme and low probability ends compared to his own cardiology patients? So when people have heart disease and he says to them, he'd say, sometimes I'm like, oh, look, we could, insert this particular kind of pacemaker or device or do this or do that. And yeah, some people wanted it, but a fair number of people were like, you know what, I've had a good run. And I don't want that. I don't want that intervention. And he talked to his oncology colleagues, and they would say it's amazing that if you tell someone that they might have a small probability at extended life, they will fly to another city regularly for experimental treatments that wreak havoc on their body. And they will do extreme things for low probability chances at a slightly extended life or slightly better quality of life. Why is that? And this is where I really get excited, because while this might seem like a boggling question to someone, Kevin Schulman, who is literally one of the smartest people I've ever met, I knew the answer because I study marketing. Because I study decision making, this had an answer. And so what we talked about was the importance of priming effects. So if you like books like Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational or other things like this, you'll know that one of the things we often do is we're impacted by cues in our environment that we don't necessarily realize we're talking about or realize that we're seeing. And priming is this process by which these little cues, we notice them at a low level of involvement, and they impact us. It's like priming a well to think in a certain direction. So for example, if you were to go out to lunch and your lunch was outdoor and it was sitting on the patio there and you were looking right at a gym and people going in and out of the gym, if you have a goal in your mind to be healthier or to be more fit, you might suddenly see, someone would say, you want the salad or the French fries, and you'd be like, salad. You didn't realize it. Now, if you have the opposite goal, like those people going to the gym are wasting their lives, it's about living well, you might be impacted in the opposite way because that goal triggered your own different goal, which was to say, you know what, I'm going to have the fries, I'm going to have the cheesecake, and I'm going to have a beer. And you just, because you're like, these guys are silly. But the thing is that it was the cue that reminded you of your own goal. And because we're people who are very diverse, we've got lots of goals. Sometimes we want to be safe, and sometimes we want to be risk-seeking. Sometimes we want to be extroverted, and sometimes we want to be introverted. Sometimes we want to be crazy, and sometimes we want to be cautious. And so I said, this is all about cues. And in all of the things around us, around cancer, the cues all point to things like this. So if you can see this, this is Ford Motor Company is talking about their breast cancer fund, Warriors in Pink. This one says, fighting back for the Susan G. Komen. The devil whispered in my ear, you're not strong enough to withstand the storm. Today I whispered in the devil's ear, I am the storm. Breast cancer warrior. Here are women with punching gloves on. Here's one that really reminds us of the military heroism. Gear up for a fight. I will stay strong. I will fight. I will win. All the language around cancer is the language of the heroic, right? That's really hard. But what it says to people is, fight on to the bitter end. You're a warrior. Differently, if you look at what people are primed with when they have heart disease, it's not heroic at all. It's stoic. Look at these things, know your heart, be aware, I will survive, be kind to your heart, be aware, take care. It's all cautious. It's all sort of just like, hey, be calm, stay calm. It doesn't have that same fighting sort of mentality. And so to what extent does this language impact us? And we had this conversation, we started some research on it, and then in the midst of that, I had the real life experience of it. So this is one of my best friends who was a economist at the University of South Carolina when I was a professor there. She is a good Tar Heel. She has her undergraduate degree from the University of North Carolina, a PhD in economics from Yale, and she taught at the University of South Carolina in health economics. We became best friends early, and it was hard to know that when Kevin and I were doing this research, she called me in the midst of it to give me some bad news, which was that her metastatic triple-negative breast cancer had returned after 1 year of treatment, which is bad news. And that things didn't look well, but she was going to fight. And so for 1 year, she did it all. She flew to Nashville every week to try experimental treatments. She, when she was about to lose her hair, she actually shaved it into a mohawk and wore Billy Idol makeup to go teach her econ classes. She was a warrior. And so I was right there in the battle with her. At some point though, nothing was working. And so I was driving down to Columbia, South Carolina a lot. And one day I was driving down and I was about 45 minutes out, and I called her just to let her know that that's how close I was. And I said, I'm just calling to let you know when I'll get there. And she said, okay, well, I'm just going to let you know that I called in hospice today. And she said it really defensively. And I was like, okay, that's fine. She's like, they're delivering a bed today. It's like, all right, I'll help you set it up. And so I got there, and we set up her bed. We went through all of the material they had given her. I helped her proofread the letter that she wrote to her 11-year-old to be given to her after her death. We talked about her funeral. She asked that Carl do it. We talked about so many things. And so at the end of that weekend when I was heading home, she said, thank you so much for everything. I was like, no, of course. And she said, you're the only person who didn't argue with me when I told them I'd called in hospice. Everyone else said, you're so strong, keep fighting. Think about that. It's so easy to raise money by telling people to fight. It's so easy to get people to be strong during their treatment by telling them to fight. But at the end, that comes around and is a double-edged sword. And all of that language hurts. And I remember, what was his name? Stuart Scott, yeah, the ESPN announcer who at his last sign-off said, don't say I lost my fight. Don't say I lost. Because that's what happens when you're a warrior. You either win or lose. That language has a narrative, and it's meaningful to us. And so that's where I really feel like the importance of understanding decision-making matters in medicine at a deep level. and why I feel very strongly that most doctors do not understand marketing for the value it could have to understand these situations. But I mean, all kinds of situations. So I want to show you something that I use frequently to try and explain to people. Jim said he liked my previous talk 12 years ago. I can barely remember. I can't believe you remember it. Because I was talking about all of us, how we as consumers make decisions. And one of the things my dad taught me is that whenever I would tell him about things, he would say, oh yes, I can see how people do that. People are so dumb. And I would say, no, Dad, you do it. He'd go, no, I'm an engineer, I'm logical. So I found that the same is true of doctors. And so what I do is before my class over at the School of Medicine, I send them an email with a survey that gets lots of different information, but I give them a couple of choice scenarios. And here's one of them. Imagine what you would do. So half the class sees this choice scenario. I say to them, imagine that you are going over to a friend's house for a casual dinner. They call you right before you're getting ready to go to their house and say, hey, I need a jar of artichoke hearts for my recipe. Do you mind stopping by the store on your way and getting it? And you say, fine. Now, I want you to raise your hand if you are an expert in artichoke hearts. Anyone? Brands, price points, attributes? No, me neither. This is why I chose artichoke hearts. So anyway, you get there and you see there are 3 brands. There's the Polar brand for $1.79, there's the Reese brand for $2.69, and there's the Delalo brand for $3.49. In your mind, don't say it out loud, but in your mind, what would you pick? Now, here's what I got in the last round of class. 61%, the majority chose the middle one. Yeah. This is what's known as the compromise effect, meaning that when we don't really know what to do, the middle answer seems safe. And the thing is that this is not irrational. This is just a normal intuition of a normal distribution, right? Normal is in the middle, freaks are on the edges, right? Like, so if you don't know, safe to be in the middle. Now, what I say to my business students is, imagine you work for Delalo and you're not happy with 22% market share. What could you do? And most of my business students say, oh, I would lower the price so that you're in the middle of these two. And I say, that would work, but it's not optimal. Because you'd lose profit margin, you would be the middle one. It's just an empirical question. Did you get enough sales to offset the loss in profit margin? But if you understand what the compromise effect is all about, you understand there's a better way. What if there's another one on the shelf, right? What if you actually put out another brand? You spend the money for a fancier label, you use your supply chain power to get some more room on the shelf, and you price it at $4.99. Now, interestingly, this is what the other half of the class sees. They hear the same scenario and they see this. Now, knowing what you know about the compromise effect, does Delalo do better or worse than last time? Better. Yes, look at that. It almost doubles its market share. Nothing about the choice changed. Nothing. It's the same price, it's the same label, it's the same everything, yet it's chosen twice as much. But you say, well, okay, well, where's the compromise effect in medicine? Oh my goodness, so many places. Number one, when you choose health insurance, and they have like the bells and whistles plan and the bare bones plan and the middle plan, lots of people are like, I don't know, what am I gonna need? I'll get the middle plan. I went to a doctor not too long ago for something that was concerning me, and she said to me, well, I see what you're talking about. I really think it's not a worry. We don't need to do anything right now. We can keep an eye on it if you want. But we could test it, and that would involve a surgery that would be invasive and have risks of its own. Now, obviously, in this world of patient engagement, you get to choose. You want to do nothing, or do you want the surgery? I was like, is there a middle ground? And then I explained to her the compromise effect, because I'm really obnoxious that way. And, you know, like one of the hardest ones is, so I did some shadowing of a physician in the neuro ICU at Duke. And this is where people have had catastrophic strokes. And so a lot of people, you know, the interactions were not with the patient themselves, it was with the family members. And the worst decision the family members get to make is, when do you remove life support? And so I talked with the people who often got this task. sometimes nurses, sometimes doctors. And we were talking about the choice architecture of that. Where do you have them do this decision? Anyway, it's a terribly arranged choice environment. But the worst thing about it is that the way it was presented to the family is, look, your loved one is there's no brain activity. We can keep them on life support, or we can continue life support. And those are your two options. And one nurse who I was talking to said, I feel like I'm offering them either a Pinto or a Porsche, right? Like, we boot you out now, or you can have this top-of-the-line, expensive treatment in perpetuity. Which do you want? And people have a hard time with that. And so we talked about what's the middle ground? What's the middle option? Would it feel better to people to say, we could do this right away? We could just keep them on life support? Or we could, make a plan that 3 days from now, if nothing changes, that's the time. And you arrange to have the music playing that they love, and you arrange to have the people in the room that they love, and we set that time. Do you feel how much easier that is, that middle option, when you're not aware? There's so many places where the compromise effect is in medicine. And what I love about consumer behavior is that it's not illogical, but it's not always consistent. Meaning consumer behavior, there's some logical utility that we all use for our decisions. We look at information, we look at probabilities, we look at all those things, but those things are like an onion where that's at the core, and then wrapped around it are heuristics like the compromise effect, things in the decision environment that can also impact us. And then wrapped around that is culture, which can take all of this and shift it. So in my shadowing, I heard one family say, we will not take our grandmother off life support. You want this room for some rich white person, and we're in Durham where people are not, my neighborhood is not appreciated, and my grandmother, if she's gonna be in this room for 2 months, that's what she deserves. They didn't think she was coming back, but they didn't like the narrative, the cultural narrative around this question. So it's interesting to see that when you're thinking about consumer behavior, you have to think of all these three things. And if you're an engineer, this is in the world of design thinking, right? This comes right at the beginning. Not like people think of marketing at the end where you build something and then you pitch it to people. That's bad marketing. Good marketing comes at the very beginning where you see all the influences. And so this really, I should stop there. You guys have been no questions, and I'm talking and talking and talking.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, you went to 15 questions? It's just I hope, to me, when I think about this stuff, my brain explodes with examples, right? All the times I've been a patient. But I can imagine if you have healthcare experience, all the times when you've had a patient making a choice. So really, I find it a fascinating field, but no more fascinating than in COVID. So when COVID rolled around, and we were working as a country very hard on the vaccine, Kevin said to me, right before it came out, he said, do you think we're gonna get to 80%? And I said, oh, no way. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, no way, nobody gets to 80% in the first year. This is an innovation truth. iPhones, electricity, all the best innovations take a really slow time. And so we wrote a paper that said, okay, if you were going to treat the vaccine as a new product, what are all the things you could do to boost acceptance of the vaccine? And that got published in the New England Journal of Medicine, thus making my mother extraordinarily proud. I might not be a doctor, but I was published like one. And so this paper was read by more people than who'd read all my research for 25 years combined. And the interesting thing is I got a call from the World Bank saying, hey, could you repeat that research, but do it in all the 7 global regions that we study? Because we're going to be sending this vaccine out and we want to know which ones work the best. And so this was my co-author, Mohammed Pateh, who was the chief medical officer for the World Bank at that time. I mean, look at Bill Gates looking at him, right? This dude is smart. He's amazing. And so we went and we found that locally, the three most important behavioral tactics we had found were use analogies, predict and address negative attributions, which basically means go after misinformation aggressively, and neutralize the base rate fallacy. I don't know if you guys know the base rate fallacy, but it's basically this. Doctors say, statistically, this is a very good thing for you to do. Patient says, yeah, but my neighbor's cousin's aunt's son got the vaccine and died the next day. Doctor, well, let me show you the statistics again. Patient, N. So basically, the base rate fallacy is that we as humans often find stories and anecdotes much more persuasive than statistics. And so what you have to do, even if you're an engineer and you think logically, even if you're a scientist and you think logically, is fight stories with stories. So when you hear about the neighbor's sister's son's daughter, then you say, well, my neighbor's sister's son's daughter had it and was so healthy and had a baby and the baby was healthy, and then, I don't know, tell stories, right? People are impacted by stories. In fact, most doctors say that if they say that someone in their family has had the same treatment, the patient goes, oh, okay. Like all the statistics in the world, when the doctor says, yes, my brother-in-law had this. Oh, that's a good one. So these are the sorts of things that, like when I published this, all of my marketing colleagues were like, how did this get so big? Because all of this is just old knowledge. This is not new knowledge. I'm like, no, all of this is low-hanging fruit. This is all obvious marketing 101 stuff in my field. But applied in this new way, it was really different and helpful. I'll show you an example. So here, what we know from marketing is that Everett Rogers, who is the great guru of innovation, showed this basic pattern and said, look, we always get this S pattern of change. Meaning at first, only a few people adopt it, then it starts to creep up exponentially as these people who want to will only do it once they see someone else do it, and then it kind of tapers off like this. So when I would talk to the NIH, when I would talk to, I even got emails, honestly, from the White House, so this is a crazy time in my life. I would say, look, this is the pattern we can expect, and they would say, no, 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 this can't possibly be, this is a life-saving vaccine. And then check this out. Here's what actually happened. And so the nice thing is that there are a lot of people at high levels who now think I'm a genius, even though Everett Rogers came up with this in the 60s. Like, this isn't new knowledge, but it's applied in a new way. So many things about, from marketing theory will explain exactly how you go after people when you're trying to get them to do something new. Working with the people who are most excited about the new thing all the way to the people who are not so excited. But let's just look at this. Basically, for the not so excited people, you have to work through all of these people first, and when you get down here, the number one thing to do to convince these people is to avoid judgment or patronization. How well did we do that as a nation? Not at all. Partner with niche opinion leaders. Oh no. Shift identity framing. Use a common enemy. Create narratives that allow for changed opinions without loss of face. We did none of those things. And yet they're like clearly, defined by theory, by tested theory from decades of marketing research. We wrote another paper that talked a lot about how lack of vaccination wasn't always driven by people who were worried about it. A lot of people were just simply apathetic. I got to be the expert endorser along with Kerry Washington, who was the celebrity endorser. I got to meet Kerry Washington, like, every time I was on a Zoom call with her, Carl would like walk casually behind me. And he would ask me things like, do you think Kerry Washington wants to meet me? And I'd say, no, she really doesn't. He's like, well, she once played a character whose husband was named Carl. And I'm like, she does not care. And I got to work with researchers and the Dunedin cohort study through New Zealand. And we found out that one of the biggest things that drove resistance to the vaccine was the number of adverse childhood effects people had had before age 5. Basically, if children before the age of 5 had learned that authority figures were not to be trusted, they were a large portion of the adults. who felt like, not were hesitant, not were like, oh, I don't know if that's the right thing, but were like conspiracy theory resistant. Interesting stuff. What I'm doing now, though, that the pandemic is over, is looking at how AI and digitally enhanced care will really make healthcare better. AI is another one of those places where there are just a ton of weird stories and a ton of strange things. And yet it has the ability to make healthcare better, both for the doctors and for the patients who are involved. So Kevin and I, together with Leah Rosengoss and Roderick Thompson and Kavita Patel, published this paper recently in New England Journal of Medicine's Catalyst on how to create this system. And I'll give you, there are many, many examples, but I want to give you one of my favorite examples from this, which is a lot of doctors are trying to take away the waiting room. You just put your phone number in, they text you when your doctor's ready to talk to you on the computer. And people are like, yay, the waiting room is such a pain, glad we don't have it. But actually, what if you were sitting there in the waiting room, and it wasn't a waiting room, it was a preparing room? What if you had a chance before you went in to see your doctor to think through what you wanted to do, to think through all the things that you needed? And the reason why I thought this was really interesting is that John Lynch, my dissertation advisor, does financial literacy research, and he says that almost all of the financial literacy interventions in the United States don't work. $6 billion is invested every year in financial literacy interventions that don't work. And the main reason is that financial literacy interventions only work if they're given to people right before they make a financial decision. So if you want to tell people about what interest, long-term interest does, it's helpful if they're just about to sign a mortgage. Jim, did I see you have a question?
Well, what is financial literacy? What do you mean?
Yes. So financial literacy is how well educated are you about finances? Do you know what a checking and savings account is? Do you know what investments are? Do you know what compound interest is? Do you know how your credit card's interest rate impacts you? That's financial literacy. Health literacy is things like, do you know what vitamins and nutrients are good for you? Do you know how much protein you're supposed to have in a day? Do you understand that smoking is not good for you? Those kinds of things. And so you'll have to forgive me, this was with Kevin again, and Kevin and I are not graphic designers, but we thought, what's their screen waiting for the doctor look like this? And it would be like, I'm sitting here and I can click on any one of these things. I can click on a little video where the doctor I'm just about to meet with will introduce themselves and tell me a little bit about themselves. I could click on videos that the doctor wants me to see. So I have issues with skin cancer, and so maybe they want me to see this little ABC rule for skin cancer. It could have my stats from last time. It could tell me what are my overdue tests, and I could click them to say that I wanted to schedule them after the visit. I could type in my goals. I could scroll through my health trends that come up through my chart. And just sitting there, I could use that 10 minutes while I'm sitting there just to get centered. Now, the other thing that can happen, though, is that while you do have that actual televisit, the nice thing is here, and I'll read these because I realize now they print it out kind of small.
Stacy,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I think you just answered it, but that is for telehealth, not in person.
Tim?
Here's the interesting
Oh, I'm
thing.
sorry.
Can't hear you.
Okay, so
Sorry.
so Tim asked, is this just for telehealth? Well, it makes the most sense for telehealth because you're sitting there in front of your computer waiting for your doctor's appointment. But as Kevin has often mentioned, you could be sitting in the actual waiting room of your doctor and be given a tablet that would have these same things. Hey, please review your past tests. Hey, please write down some things you want to make sure that you don't forget to ask the doctor. So it doesn't have to be just for telehealth, but it definitely makes the most of it. This is how I would do it. But the thing is that let's say you go to telehealth, although again, you could imagine it in a person-to-person world, but technology can create clinical notes and records. It can create a transcription of your visit that can come with you, that you can share with your loved ones if you want them to, when they say, well, what did the doctor say? You just hand them the transcript. You hand them the recording. Doctors have an easier time because they're not having to take notes while they're talking to you. You ever go to a visit and the doctor's not even facing you, they're facing the computer screen and they're looking over their shoulder talking to you while they type? Yeah, like imagine that someone else is the digital scribe and they're just facing you. There are many things though. One of the things that I think is really interesting is Kevin and his colleagues did a clinical home care bot for diabetes. And so what they did was they took an Amazon Alexa. If any of you guys have an Alexa device at home that tells you the weather and whatnot, they gave one to newly diagnosed diabetes patients. And they used the AI in there. The patient would tell them their blood sugar ratings, and the device would optimize what they should be doing with their insulin. And they got to an optimal insulation. Insulin, yes, thank you. I was like, where did that word go? They got to an optimal level of insulin titration because the AI was helping them. It cut back drastically on the number of times the patient had to go in and get tested and have someone reconfigure their dosage. And it saved time, it got people to an optimal medication level, and just all number of good things through that AI device. So even though the AI world is fraught with scary things, it has these amazing abilities too. But you can't just design things and hope people will use them. So Bob and I were on the same wavelength because I want to also give you a quote from Field of Dreams. And my quote from Field of Dreams is this: "If you build it, they will come," is a line that was beautiful in the movie. But it is a terrible marketing plan. It is the world's worst marketing plan, and yet it is basically what we do in so many of the life sciences. I often say to people, if you use the word should in any part of your marketing business plan or discussion of the future, you have already lost. Because the word should means you didn't listen and you don't know what will happen, how people really are. You're thinking how you think they should be. And especially in medicine, wasting the good works of so many innovators is horrible. And a science, consumer behavior marketing, exists that can fix that problem. There's decades of research that speaks exactly to how people use new things. And it is my goal, my two big dreams, if you were to ask me, one is to really develop digitally enabled care in a way that increases both quality and accessibility of care. I have land in a family town in Wyoming that only has 2,000 people in it and has very, very little health care access. So if people live in this little town in Wyoming, how do they get good care? I hope that digitally enabled care can help with that. But honestly, one of my biggest is to have a national platform to develop and advocate for patient-centric innovation in medical schools. So how can you teach the next generation of healthcare practitioners about decision-making, about how people adopt innovations and bringing all these things together? The logical utility of something, the decision heuristics that surround it, and the cultural meaning that it has in our lives. So I really, really appreciate this chance to speak to you. But you are all patients. We've all been patients. What here is interesting to you? And you have to stand up, I've been told.
I'd say, 10 years ago in this group, every one of us probably went through the polio vaccine. Not so high a percentage today, but we all went through it and we're all here. And we probably all know one person or someone who died of polio. How does that compare, and has that comparison been made directly today to the vaccine for COVID?
Yeah, so one of the cool things in medicine, I find that there are a lot of really great initiatives in medicine that are well-meaning and positive on one side, but have unintended consequences. And one of the things that they started talking about a number of years ago is more patient engagement in choice and in medicine. So there was a time when the doctor told you what to do, and it never occurred to you to question that, and you just did. And so through time, there's like, well, we should have more agency. People should have more choice. It's better if people can choose what they want to do. So now there's more of where doctors feel like they're giving advice, but the patient might choose something different. And so I think polio was a time, just as like, for people who talk about the polio epidemics, in the middle of it, when people were afraid to go to school and things like that, it was just as scary as COVID, just as scary. So there's no difference in the amount of fear. But in one case, people were told, you do this. And in another case, and the culture was, yes, this is the paternalistic doctor who tells me what to do, we do it. And in this other case, there's more of a sense of, well, you decide whether you want to do it. And that's where it opens it up to everything, right? And so then it's not that people won't do it, it's just going to take a lot longer of a time to do it. So that's that S curve of innovation. It's not going to be mandated, whether by law or by culture. It's got to flow through society at how any other choice does. I think that's the big difference, right? Was that the level of patient-based agency, which is not a bad thing, caused society as a whole to have different perspectives on, yes, I'm doing it right away. No, I'm going to wait a little bit while. No, I think this is a problem. And it went, yes.
But is there no way to accelerate that upslope of the curve? Because we live now in a world where everybody wants to be their own judge. We should all do our own research about vaccines, shouldn't we?
Yes, and that is one of the things. So I'm going to just flip back here. That was what this paper was. So this paper here was basically, let me give you 12 strategies that accelerate that curve.
Okay.
And so the 12 strategies to accelerate the curve were these behavioral tactics. These are how you promote any new thing, a vaccine or whatever. And so like you could take, for instance, increased observability. Some innovations don't spread very fast because you don't see them. So if someone in your neighborhood gets a new sleep number bed, how do you know? I mean, are you in their house, like looking under their sheets? No, it's not observable. But if someone gets a new, iPhone, you see it in their hand, it's sitting on the table. It's observable, it spreads faster. So all the things they did with stickers and people putting on Facebook that they had done it and bracelets actually came, I don't know if they did it because they read this paper, but it was promoted in this paper, like that's a really good thing to do, is get people to show and make observable that they had the vaccine. Because you really couldn't see, Band-Aid. Yes?
Hi, Captain Fred McLaren, U.S. Navy, retired PhD. My life is mostly spent in nuclear submarines, and I was a nuclear attack submarine captain, and I realized just listening to you, we operated on the extreme because we couldn't afford to compromise either with health situations or anything, and I've experienced everything to being depth charged for 7.5 hours by the Soviets as a skipper, having 2 torpedoes come towards us, about to insert a special team in the North Vietnam, and find that one of the people is freaking out because he's burned out. And of course, as you can imagine, we've had to take extreme measures with its health. If somebody has a dental problem, we yank the tooth. If we cut something off, then we cauterize it, we continue the mission. If somebody has a psychological problem, all you can do is tranquilize them. And
remove them from the chain of command.
Technical question, we're on the extreme end as far as complex
Yes.
technical technology and nuclear power and all that. And so in many ways it's been easy because you make that the extreme, the most optimum, reliable, and there's no compromise. And it's interesting training people in the civilian life to work into that. And then your submarine crew is in many cases the final arbitrator.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of nice because in some cases where, I'm going the wrong way, where some things are really, really important, in essence, you take away this, right? Like you mandate immediate adoption. My parents live in St. Mary's, Georgia, by the way, which is by Kings Bay, and so we always talk about nuclear subs. But yeah, like that's kind of that same mentality of, look, we don't have time to monkey around with people making choices. you just do what you say. In the medical field, many of you may know Christy Page, who's the new interim dean at the medical school now. She was my doctor when I first moved here. She delivered both of my babies, and very bad deliveries. No. Sorry. Do not tell me that. Let me back up. I was what's known as a difficult case. I was a geriatric mother with rotating babies. And so I literally put my life and my children's lives into Christy's hands and would do so anytime. But you're supposed to write in this, you're supposed to write a birth plan. What to you is the mother one. And my birth plan was one line, and I typed it out and I handed it to Christy, and it said, you are the expert, do what you want, and tell me if there's time to tell me. And it's like, if I give you marketing advice and you don't take it, well, I think that's silly. I felt like if she was going to give me medical advice and I didn't take it, that was silly. But that always doesn't, like, we've been taught to like make our own decisions, that's a more responsible thing. But I think different places exist where there's a strict chain of command and enough expertise needed that you just defer responsibility.
That doesn't mean, though, that we didn't have time to instruct. Everybody understood always why we did something, unless it was something very simple.
This has been amazing.
Folks, if you can remember to bring your plates to the window and have a great week.
I got priorities for you. I would take a while right now. Over 30 articles. That's why you have all 3 morning shows.
Well, we should.
Sex, religion, royalty, and mystery abroad. Mystery. Our university, they don't do better. He said, we just want to sit there and just cry. What are we going to do? Everybody says, she's showing up at the ball game. I don't care. She might be able to show up at the ball game. And she starts interfering in the university contract. That's a step too far.
Hey, I'm going to ask you a question.
question since you brought I don't know the answer. Oh, God. I'm sorry. Yeah. How many, I know you don't know the answer. How many games is he going to win, and how long is he going to, out of 12, how many games is he going to win, and how long is he going to be here?
You know what would be fun in the club the week before? Everybody over the poker on how many games do you think they'll win? And then the you would say, how many points are we going to score? The 2 or 3 things that we
that would be fun. That would be fun.
I think we will be lucky to win an 8 ball. I think we'll be lucky to win 8 ball.
Hey, okay. Well, we were 7-5.
That's what I said.
Lucky on 8, probably 6. My guess would be 6. I don't know.
I'm willing to go 7. I'm kind of in the middle of it.
Nobody, very few people, they keep describing his coaching. Guess what? The coach of Tom Brady, he's a loser. He was fired from one NFL school, and after Brady left, he's a loser again. And so,
who made it happen?
now you really are. Did he make Tom Brady? Guess what? Tom Brady left and went and won a Super Bowl.
He
was
a defensive coach. We're talking about hey, that wasn't
Brady left. I'm cynic about it. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it.
You were talking about Google. I'll tell you real quickly. I keep asking myself the question for some reason. Why did human beings quit eating other human beings? And look it up on Google. And the reason seems to be they figured out they were getting sicker eating human beings than they were eating other animals, because we have more now.
How many times do you say your life? When it's your sister, it's not fun.
Sounds good. I want to make sure we meet people. And,
I'm sure they will.
I didn't remember that.
all right, say hi to Ken.
Yeah.
I feel like
Have a good weekend.
Oh yeah, I heard. Sounds like fun.
I really need to see.
I'm staying home. Yes. And I'm power washing the back of my house.
I guess.
We'll have a great weekend.
It's all about just like yes. What's it? These shoes? I said you. I thought I heard what's like what the shoes are for. They're comfortable.
We got a lot of
We were in the Murray Church, and so
it's okay.
Well, thanks for
they're not interested in having wine tasting. We actually did Rice Church did the ferry and and that was really neat too, because then yeah, exactly. And so the number of it separates out, and I thought, oh, this mass the week last one, I'm like, I gotta get your email set up there. We were invited to spend 3 months in 2023 and then just did 2 months this last year. And so we, the last time, went all around the South Island. So we've been everywhere of note on the South Island. And this time we went to the caravan and drove all around the North Island. So we got to Rotary.
Yeah. How does this when I was in LA? Those nice.
All these
Yeah.
I will think on it, but it's having just my airline tickets, I don't want to call them. They do like, very cheap, but on the other hand, you're like, why not, where are we going to get to Cape Town?
Right.
So I did months of camping with my mom when I got my PhD in Africa.
Good to talk to
And
you.
my parents are amazing, like, they're crazy. Yes, they're big travelers. And so when I got my PhD, we did a bunch of things all around. I have never seen
I'm a double gator too. That's what I'm, oh yeah. About 20 years before you. You know, at least 20 years before you. I love your talk. It's really good. Yeah, double gator. When I say that.
Did I make Gator Nation proud?
Yes, ma'am.
You see like you saw?
You were spot on. Left her stuff. Oh, okay, Harold. No, yes, I'm great to see you. I'm gonna just text me from the car. Yeah, and then I'm available. Other than Wednesday, all
Time.
Okay, well, we should.
Time passes. He left in 2017.
Sorry.
Absolutely, take care. No, I got
Highlighting my baseball career was when my first year at Pony League, you were the commissioner of the Chapel Hill Pony, and when you called in the first game, you were up there on that PA and called out all the players to run out there on the field like we were in the All-Star.
Why not have fun?
You were. Oh, no way, really?
Guess what? You know, Bill Chief Blue?
He's got it.
No, I'm sorry, man, not yours, but Coy,
He was my coach.
Coy was your.
Most of the coaches were policemen.
And I think that we're just kind of.
This is not how long ago did it happen? There was a time I knew every single member of the police department because they were only 9.
Oh, wow.
That was
Only
that
9.
was a good thing and a bad thing. You know, well,
Like
they
my
also
Stand up being involved.
some of the policeman's sister worked for my dad. And so, you know, a good thing and a bad thing. But he was a commissioner of Pony League, and he was the first game I was 13 years old. Just Jim having on the PA. Every player's name goes line up and down the first base line like when you get ready to play in the World Series.
I love it. You're in the big
I thought I
time.
was in the big time. Down at Harborough Lions Park.
My daughters don't see that sense of humor and all that. But I did, after I became a single dad, I was obsessive about sports. I wanted to.
That's so.
I struggled with my wife.
Yeah.
And I was going to have it. So at any rate,
Yes, I'm sure she does.
it was to get them to the age of emancipation, no life-changing.
That's all, that's a role.
That's
It's all right.
That's my
It's a hard
Yeah.
situation
Okay.
for a lot of people.
That's why we're with
But when I talk to people too, like, there's no.
So when they win, so it also gives them choices. So Mary Lou was the oldest daughter, she would do it. So
Like almost administrative
so what I would do is
But a lot of
bring that,
people don't
and I would say,
have
so you don't ever tell them what time we're in.
Well, Frank, I'm so glad to see you. Yeah. I'll mention, yes, I will.
So I say, what time was everybody coming in?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I recognize your name and number.
That's the group.
Yeah, good to see you.
And so,
What do you think?
You were amazing. That was fantastic. I'm Erin, by the way.
Hey, Erin, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So we were talking about, I've been in Chapel Hill so long that there was a time when I knew every member of the police department because there were only 9. And I was the Pony League baseball commissioner, and he was one of my players. And it was Coy Durham, who was the captain of the police department.
And all the coaches were police.
Who was his coach. And they're great. I've got a couple of things there. But see, all right, so
Nice to see you.
how old are your kids?
10 and 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you got a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So when I became a single dad, I was obsessed with this. Not just that you gotta be able to, have your kids. So the first one, to be able to talk to them and get the same language. The first one, Mary Lou was 12. I tried that thing, see if we could have a meeting about adolescence.
So she brought that up.
I'm smart, yeah, well, I think you're pretty cool. Let me tell you, this is the time. People from childhood go, as you're trying to figure things out, you're going to decide, I'm really stupid. You're really stupid. That's why adolescents come. Now, you think if we just keep talking like this, we can possibly avoid that? She says, probably not. So this is my giving the story. So my kids grew up. I've got 3 daughters. Oldest daughter was Mary Lou. And so the idea was that you would say, what time is it? But the boy would pick her up. What time? Instead of telling them to come in and say, okay, what's happening tonight? When's everybody going home? So you would give them that choice. Okay. So in the first meeting we would have with the guy would be to say, I remember this was Peter Kiffney, her dad. His dad was the veterinarian. Good people. And I said, Peter, this is what we do. I said, it's going to be, they said 11:30. I said, okay, it's 11:30. And I said, so Peter, just understand my job. Take care of Mary Lou and get her to the age of emancipation without being any calamity.
Yes.
Mary Lou would be going on.
So how are you going to keep her alive?
And this is what we do. And I said, so at 11:30, I'll still be up to the rescue golf and having a good time. Peter, if you're there and you're having fun, and everybody's being there, and you want another half hour, call me. I'll be up, I'll be away. Call me and tell me it's going to be midnight. In this case, I'll be up midnight. But I don't want to hear about you roaring down the road over the speed limit, trying to get back here on time. If I hear about that, it's just not going to be very good.
Yeah.
We don't want to. And so
That's great. I like that.
yeah. So you can stay up. You can make whatever, but you got to call me. So then, the second day, not the first day, but the second day, what time's everybody coming in? At midnight. Okay. So it's now, so this goes back to the police department and knowing all the guys, but that's when I started this story. So now it's about 12, 10, 12. So I said, okay, they're not here. So first thing I did was call Dr. Giffney. Woke him up. Have you heard they're late coming in?
when are they supposed to come in? I said, well, they had said 11:30 in Atlanta, but they're not here. I'll let you know if they're okay. And then I called the police. I told them who I was, and I said, look, you will do me a favor. This is my daughter's good day. They're driving, and he has a little green Opel. And if you happen to see, if your guys see a little green Opel driving in the neighborhood of the Oaks where I live on 933 Drive with my first drive, if you see it, you'll do me a big favor if you will stop him. And ask him if he's all right, or if he's doing anything, stop him for anything you can get him to do, and do that. And they said, oh, Jim, we've got it, so we'll take care of that. So anyway, and then he got home. So now Mary Lou comes in, it's about 12:29, comes in, I'm at the front door, hey, y'all have a good time? And I go, hey, Mary Lou, good to see you. And I turn out, so Peter, so like, okay, you need to call your dad.
Yeah.
Your dad is, mom and dad, they're
Right.
Just like it up for a minute, I turned, I said, oh, and there's the police. Call the police and let them know that you're.
Oh, no, she's like,
I was going to have a good time, Mary Lou, I'm going to bed.
Oh.
No big speech. Didn't fuss at them.
Great lesson learned.
Guess what? I got 3 daughters. Never one was never late again for the next 10 years.
You teach that lesson once.
Yeah, that way.
So it's not hard. No scolding. No, just say that this is my job. And so then that had to do with other things.
No, I love that.
That's one of the advantages of knowing the guys at the police department.
Yes. That's really, my mother actually had me sign a contract that I wouldn't rebel as a teenager. She had the same talk with me about 12. And she's like, look, it's really a pain to be a teenager because your parents are always giving you curfews and trying to restrict you because they're worried, and that's because you're trying to reject them and their ideals. And if you just agree not to do that, then you don't have to have a curfew. You can have all this freedom. I will trust you, but you've got to not rebel. And I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah,
I signed it, and I never rebelled, and we were always like super close and good friends throughout. But my sister, who wouldn't sign the same contract, had a curfew, and she got in trouble because the very first night with a curfew, she was home 5 minutes after the curfew. My parents were like, 2 weeks. And then the next time she was 1 minute late, 2 weeks. And she's like, Stacy never had a curfew. And my mom's like, she signed the contract. I was like,
oh, yeah. I've got a kid in mine, and oldest is in NC State. She's at Wilson College of Textiles and Fashion Design, and then I have a middle schooler and high schooler as well. But I always say I have one rule. Just make smart choices, and I don't do all those strict about stuff, but that can be like make smart choices, chew with your mouth shut, make smart choices, get home in time, be communicative. I've got a car spot too, sorry, I don't mean to
no worries. In fact, I was going to ask if I could take one of these home. It made me sound so nice. I'd like to show it.
I love that. You were fantastic. I'm in the film and TV, and I do immersive marketing, and so different industries, but a lot of what you said really resonated for the world that I'm around. So,
there you go. I have an one.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was really
good to hear.
Yeah, see how you apply it. Nice and bye, Jim. Yeah.
About the choices, and you know that when you do those 3 titles, the good, better, best, the first company known to do that is Sears. Historically,